You've met this person before. They barely talk in meetings. They don't correct people when they're wrong. They let other people take credit, take the spotlight, take the loudest seat at the table. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've probably thought, they must not have much going on up there. Here's the uncomfortable question worth sitting with for the next 15 minutes. What if that assumption is exactly backwards? What if the quietest person in the room is usually the one who's noticed the most? There's a reason a fox can walk through a forest full of bigger, louder, more aggressive animals and still come out on top more often than you'd expect. It's not strength. It's not speed. The fox mind survives by watching first and revealing nothing until the exact moment it needs to. Everything else, the silence, the stillness, even looking like it's not paying attention, is just camouflage for the fact that it's paying attention to everything. And there's a story that shows exactly what that looks like in a place you wouldn't expect to find it. Not a forest, an office. Two guys started the same job, same week, same company. Somewhere in the UK. We'll call them Yen and Jim. Jim was the kind of guy everyone noticed in week 1. Loud in the best way, at least on the surface. Funny in meetings. Quick with a comment. Always had an opinion ready before anyone finished asking the question. He told people often how sharp he was, how nothing got past him. And next to him, there was Yen. Quiet, watchful, the kind of person who answered when asked something and otherwise just observed. Jim picked up on that fast. And he did what people like Jim usually do with someone like Yen. He started making jokes about him. Light at first. Yen, you even awake over there? Then less light. In front of clients, in front of managers. Jim would joke that Yen was the quiet one because there wasn't much going on. Idle, slow. The implication was always there, even when the words were soft enough to laugh off. Yen never defended himself, not once. He just kept doing his work, quietly, the same way he always had. Now here's where you'd expect this story to go. If you've watched enough of these videos, you'd expect me to tell you Yen secretly outworked everyone, pulled an all-nighter, delivered some heroic project, and got revenge in dramatic fashion. That's not what happened. What happened is much smaller, much quieter, and honestly, more believable. 6 months in, review season came around, and the company gave Yen an award. Not a flashy one, a real one. The kind tied to actual performance numbers. The kind that comes with an actual promotion. Leadership specifically called out his consistency. The way he'd quietly picked up problems other people missed. The way clients kept asking for him by name without him ever campaigning for it. Jim, the one who'd spent 6 months being the loudest person in every room, let go, quietly, the same week. So here's the real question. Not what happened to Jim. We'll come back to that. But why did almost everyone in that office read the situation backwards? For 6 straight months? Why did the room collectively decide that the quiet guy was the slow one, and the talkative guy was the sharp one? This is where it gets genuinely interesting. Because it's not really about Yen and Jim at all. It's about how the human brain processes information. It hasn't actually verified. Humans judge competence almost instantly, often within seconds of meeting someone, and we judge it using cues that have almost nothing to do with actual ability, confidence, volume, speed of response. Eye contact? Someone who talks fast and talks often gets coded, automatically, as the smart one. Not because anyone checked their actual output, but because fluency feels like intelligence to a brain that's pattern matching in real time. Psychologists have a name for this. It's sometimes called the fluency heuristic, and it's brutally simple. We mistake how smoothly someone presents themselves for how much they actually know. A fox could never survive if other animals judge threat level the same lazy way. But in a human office, it works on almost everyone. For 6 months, it worked on an entire company. Here's what's even more interesting though, and this is the part most people never think about. While Jim was busy being noticed, what was he actually spending his energy on? Every clever comment, every joke at Yen's expense, every moment performing confidence in a meeting. That's not free. Attention is a limited resource. And Jim was spending almost all of his on being seen as sharp, instead of on actually being sharp. Yen wasn't doing that math consciously. He probably wasn't doing any of this on purpose, in some calculated chess master way. But functionally, here's what was happening. Every ounce of attention Jim spent managing how he looked to other people. Yen spent on the actual work in front of him. watching the client's real concerns instead of just nodding along, noticing the small process error nobody else caught. 6 months of that compounds into something real. 6 months of performing confidence compounds into a really good performance, and not much else underneath it. This is the part where the fox lens actually earns its place in this story. And not as a cute metaphor. Fox doesn't waste energy, posturing at every animal in the forest to prove it's dangerous. It saves that energy, stays low, stays unnoticed, right up until the one moment that energy actually matters. Loud, constant displays of dominance are mostly something prey animals fall for, not something a fox needs to bother with. Because it's not trying to win a reputation contest. It's trying to actually eat. Jim was running a reputation contest the entire time. Yen wasn't entered in it. But I want to be careful here, because there's a trap in this story if we leave it where it is. It's tempting to say, quiet people are always the secretly brilliant ones, and that's not true either. And it's not what this video is actually about. There's a real difference between someone who's quiet because they're observing, and someone who's quiet because they're scared. Fear-based silence looks similar from the outside, but it comes from a completely different place. Someone staying quiet because they're worried about being judged, or because they've been shut down before and learned it's safer not to speak. That kind of silence isn't strategic. It's protective, and it usually comes with real anxiety underneath it. Not calm observation. Observational silence is different. It's not, I'm scared to talk. It's, I don't need to talk right now. Because talking isn't what's useful right now. One drains a person. The other one's actually restful, almost, because there's no internal performance running underneath it. If you've ever stayed quiet in a room and felt completely at ease doing it, not anxious, just present, that's probably the second kind. And if that's you, you've probably been underestimated by people like Jim more than once in your life. Real quick, because this is exactly the kind of thing this channel is built around. If you're someone who finds this stuff genuinely interesting, how attention works, why people get misread, why the quiet ones are sometimes the ones actually running the show internally, that's the whole reason Fox Mindset exists. We put a new video out every few days, exploring exactly this kind of thing. So if that's your thing, the subscribe button's right there. Now here's something else worth noticing about Jim's downfall. Because it wasn't just that he talked too much. It's what talking that much actually cost him specifically. Every time Jim told the room how sharp he was also quietly revealing how much he needed the room to know it. That need doesn't stay hidden. People pick up on it, even subconsciously. The constant self-promotion starts to read. Over time, as insecurity wearing a confident outfit. And worse, every joke Jim made about Yen being slow was actually information about Jim, not about Yen at all. It told everyone watching exactly how much Jim relied on putting other people down to make himself look bigger by comparison. A fox revealing its position too early loses the hunt. A human revealing their insecurity too often loses the room. Just slower. And in a way that's much harder to take back once people have noticed it. Meanwhile, Yen wasn't hiding anything on purpose. But because he wasn't broadcasting anything either, nobody had information to use against him. Nobody could point to something he'd boasted about and failed to deliver. There was simply nothing said yet to contradict. By the time his work actually spoke, there was no gap between what he'd claimed and what he'd done. Because he'd never claimed anything in the first place. This is maybe the real difference between the two of them, underneath everything else. Jim was constantly trying to convince people of something. Yen was just doing the thing. One of those requires an audience to keep working. The other one doesn't need anyone watching at all. Which is exactly why it kept working, even when nobody was. Now here's something worth sitting with that goes beyond Yen and Jim entirely. Because this pattern doesn't just show up in offices. It shows up in friendships, in families, in creative work, in relationships. There's almost always a Jim and a Yen dynamic happening somewhere near you. Maybe even inside you. A part of you that wants to announce progress. And a quieter part that knows announcing it usually slows it down. Think about the last time you told someone about a goal, before you'd actually done anything toward it. And think about what happened to that goal after you told them. For a lot of people, the conversation about the goal quietly replaces the goal itself. The feeling of having talked about it creates just enough satisfaction to reduce the urgency to actually build it. The fox doesn't do that. It doesn't describe the hunt before the hunt. It doesn't get the reward of announcing the intention. It only gets the reward of the actual catch. which means the hunger that drives it never gets replaced by the feeling of a conversation that went well. That's not just a fox behavior. That's a philosophy of protecting your own momentum from your own need to be seen. And it's one of the quietest, most underestimated skills in any room. Here's one more thing Jim got wrong, and this one is subtle. Every time he performed in a meeting, he was training the people around him to expect that performance, which meant on the days when his energy was low, or when he was working through something difficult, the gap between his usual performance and his real one became visible. People noticed. Not consciously maybe, but they noticed. Yen never had that problem. You can't disappoint an expectation you never set. The baseline people had for Yen was just shows up, does good work, doesn't make noise, which meant every time his work landed well, it registered as a pleasant surprise rather than him just meeting the bar he'd already set through. Self-promotion. That's a specific kind of intelligence. Not just being good, but managing how your consistency lands over time. And it's invisible unless you know to look for it, which most people never do. Before you leave, let's turn this into something you can actually use. Today, you learned 3 things. First, quiet doesn't automatically mean weakness. More often than people realize, the person who observes the most says the least. Second, attention is your most valuable resource. Every minute you spend trying to look impressive is a minute you're not becoming impressive. And third, real confidence doesn't need an audience. It lets results speak first. Now put this into practice. The next time you're in a meeting, a conversation, or even with friends, don't rush to prove yourself. Listen a little longer. Observe before you react. Let people reveal themselves while you stay focused on what actually matters. Then when you finally speak, make sure your words add value, instead of simply adding noise. If you practice that consistently, something quietly changes. You stop chasing approval. You notice what everyone else misses. Your decisions become calmer. Your words carry more weight. And people begin to respect you because of what you consistently do, not because of what you constantly say. That's the fox mindset. See more, say less. Move with purpose. But remember, observation is only half of the journey. A fox doesn't just watch. It grows, adapts, and acts when the moment is right. If you want to build that second half, the video on your screen, 6 weird habits that prove you have a growth mindset, is your next step. Those 6 habits turn today's lesson into something you can live every single day. I'll see you there.